How about one more fact while we're waiting to get started?
Koalas are native to Australia.
Yeah, so koalas are native to Australia. So they're an animal that we are very proud of and that we have to take very good care of. So today's event is put on by ourselves and the Toowoomba Region Koala Habitat Project. I have just introduced myself, and most of you know Rebecca Kirby, who is up the back there and is our wonderful coordinator at Pittsworth Landcare and also Millmerran Landcare. Okay, so we've called today Koalas Out West, all about farmers caring for the future of our koalas. So we consider ourselves west of the Dividing Range, and that our koalas are very special to us and have their own unique qualities that are quite interesting, and we're finding out more and more about them all the time. I want to tell you a little bit about Pittsworth District Landcare. So Pittsworth District Landcare Association has been around for over 35 years. I've been involved for almost 20 of those. And they have always had a bit of a focus on protecting native habitat, native animals, and looking to sustainable farming practices. The photo of the dragon up there, because a lot of you will associate Pittsworth District Landcare with a little grassland earless dragon. So the Landcare group was instrumental in. It was actually the discovery of a new species, and that species was named back in 2014. So it's a very, very special part of Pittsworth District Landcare history. The Koalas in Our Backyards project started back in 2012. So Pittsworth Landcare was very aware that the koalas in our area were under a few threats, and habitat loss was one of them. So they instigated a project where we started encouraging local landholders to plant habitat again on their properties. Since 2012, we have in fact planted over 22,000 trees in the local area. That Koalas in Our Backyard project has morphed over the years. We've had a few different names of projects, but I thought I would just bring it down to basically three main things that we do these days. So we still encourage people to plant habitat. We still provide seedlings and the stakes and everything you need to plant them. We do have some available today, so please make sure you don't leave here without some seedlings to take home and look after and plant. I've got a habitat apps and scats. That seems to be what a lot of our koala projects have been focused on. So the apps is all about recording the koala sightings that we see, and scats is all about collecting the poo, which we use for all sorts of purposes. So a little bit more about the habitat. So as I said, we provide landholders with everything they need to have the best success to get those seedlings growing. In some cases we arrange site visits by ecologists so that we can work out the best species to plant in that area. We also did a lot of local seed collection, so the plants that we are getting have been grown from seed that has been collected locally. And Beth is also very instrumental in maintaining our habitats through her work with cool burns and other weed removal methods. Now, I just want to mention to you, so we talk about koala habitat, and I guess koalas are an animal that everyone knows and everyone is very happy to support and do their best for, but I want you to think of koalas as an umbrella species. So by protecting the habitat of koalas, you're actually also protecting lots of other species. Who can tell me what other animals might live in the trees where koalas live? Snakes, yes. Does anyone know any others?
And also
Lizards. What about you, Boston?
possums.
Possums, great. Anyone else have any ideas? Oh, you're on a, yeah. Goannas, great. Yeah.
Children.
Birds, great. Birds, great one.
Children.
they have to climb pretty high to get up some of those trees, don't they? Sugar gliders. You guys are really clever. Bats. Well done. You guys have done a pretty good job at working all of these out. But the habitat that you're restoring is home not just to koalas, but to birds. Lots of birds, cockatoos, lorikeets, all those ones that we love to see around. Reptiles, so as we mentioned, monitors, snakes, mammals like possums and sugar gliders. But some of the things you didn't mention was insects. So we need the habitat for a lot of our insects, and also it provides protection for a lot of our native grasses and some vegetation.
Are those stuff up there?
No, they're not bugs, they're actually flowers. What insect do you think might like to... you are brilliant. Bees and butterflies, well done to you. For those of you who are thinking about planting up some more habitat, a lot of the questions I get is how long will I'll be dead before the trees are big enough for a koala to be in it. But I just wanted to share a couple of photos I took last year. So the first one there is actually from one of our original plants that were planted. So back in 2012, I was taking up Paula Helford's place. It's a massive tree and there's a mum and baby there. But then, not far down the road, at Mr. Panic's house, there was a koala in a tree that was only, this was last year, 3 years old. So for those of you thinking that, it does make a difference. And within a few years, you could be providing some essential food source and habitat for some critters. So as I said, habitat is a big part of what we do at Pittsworth Landcare, and monitoring has become a big activity that we are all involved in. So what that means is we record sightings. We've also made ourselves very aware of signs of illness and injuries in koalas, so we can pick up if a koala might need some help. And then of course just awareness and signage, and you might see some of the signs we put out sometimes warning that a koala was recently seen in this area. Who has seen a koala? Who's seen a koala in the wild? Who's seen a koala in the last 6 months? Ooh. Who's seen a koala in the last week? Ooh. Who's seen a koala in the last day? So all of our sightings get registered on these apps, and these apps are available to everyone to record their sightings on. So if anyone's interested in that, please talk to me afterwards and I can take you through how to do that. There are a number of apps, as you can see. iNaturalist is probably the easiest one to use. You can simply take a photo with your phone and it automatically uploads everything from that photo. I do want to stress that every sighting actually is important. So obviously another big part of what we do, and we have done over the last year in particular, is scat collection. Do you know what a scat is? Poo. So scat is, a nice word for poo. So if you join Pittsworth Landcare, you can join us going out and collecting poo. We've done a couple of big projects over the last 12 months. The main one being with OWAD, which is a private environmental consultancy company in Brisbane. So we got some money through a grant, and we collected over 100 samples, but we got DNA profiles, complete DNA profiles from 82 of those individuals. So the way they get, you've all seen CSI shows and all that, so with the scat sample they're able to get some of the animals' cells from the outside of the palate as it passes through the animal's digestive tract, I guess. And I have some demonstrations down on our stand to show you, but they have to be collected a very certain way, packaged up a very certain way, because the outside of that scat is where all of that important information is. So we had a really good success rate. And we did collect those samples from all over the Toowoomba region, so not just in this region. And all of those samples have now been run through for genetics testing. So getting information, one of the things we're worried about with our koalas is, are they becoming sort of isolated and inbred, or are they managing to have a nice healthy gene flow with other koalas? This report will come out at the end of the year, and we are planning a day to go through all of that with people who know all of that science and can explain it. But in simple terms, it seems our koalas are actually quite healthy and viable populations. There's not a lot of inbreeding, there's not a lot of chlamydia, and we also tested them for core viruses. There's a whole heap of different core viruses, which Rosie will probably know a lot more about, but one of the interesting things was our koalas all tested negative for core V, which is apparently a nasty one. Anyway, it's given us a baseline of data that we may just reassess in another few years and see what's changed with the koalas. We've also collected scats for other research projects, looking at diet analysis, so looking to see what species they're actually eating, and currently to look at their stress levels. At the end of the day, the reason we do this is just we care very deeply for the koalas in this area, and I think the reason you're all here is because you care too, and we definitely do need to do what we can to help out the koalas that are living in our region. One of the ways you could do that is join Pittsworth Landcare. If anyone is interested in joining, please come in and talk to us. It's a really great group of people. They all care about the local environment, and there's lots of very knowledgeable people in there who can help you with lots and lots of issues in regards to land management. My little saying at the end there is just less screen time, more green time, and I think that's always a good thing. I will introduce our next speaker, Associate Professor Rosie Booth, or just Dr. Rosie, as I know her as. So I'll let Rosie explain to you all of the work that she does. Rosie is a very esteemed wildlife veterinarian and wildlife conservationist, and I will hand to her.
Hello. So what I want to talk to you today is how much can a koala bear? So I'm talking about habitat loss, climate change, disease, but mostly it's all about habitat. So what would I even know about koalas? Just a very quick background so you know where I'm speaking to you from. I met my first koala when I was a private practice vet in mixed practice at Pine Mountain. It got hit by a car and broke its leg. And it changed the course of my life. I fixed it and became fascinated with how different it was to the dogs and cats and other animals I was used to working with. So I started a master's in 1986 on stress in koalas, and then became a wildlife vet. And in 2015, I was the director of Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, working with all of the koalas that came out of the Moreton Bay Regional Council, for a range of reasons, which I'll talk about later. But so that was 6 years. So now I'm semi-retired and I have two part-time jobs. One is working with a population of koalas at Grantchester, free-ranging on a 4,800 hectare nature refuge. And another one is working for the University of Southern Queensland, looking at the koalas in this region, in the west. So I'm hoping that the audience might be a little bit interested in how we go about doing a health assessment on a wild koala. So if you're going to work out if the koala is healthy or not as an individual, you need to first of all find it before you can catch it, and then you anaesthetise it to do a clinical exam on it, because you can't do a full clinical exam on a conscious koala. It won't enjoy the experience and it could hurt you. So it's to reduce the stress for the animal and to increase the safety for the examiner. A full clinical exam on an animal is probably more thorough than the average exam you get at the doctor's when you go there. And we do a range of diagnostic tests looking for diseases and any other issues that they might have. We apply individual identification to them in the form of ear tags, microchips, and sometimes a radio collar. and then you have to recover them from the anaesthetic in a safe place, and then at the appropriate time after they're recovered, release them back into the tree you captured them from. So that's just a quick update on what that would be like. So find them. I'll leave the drone talk more to Chris Meibusch, but we use thermal imaging drones. It's certainly the most effective way to find a koala. Unless you're in the region around Pittsworth where you can drive by in your car and there are so few trees that you can find them really easily. So how do you catch them? Have you done much koala catching, Lana?
I had my first actually last week.
Oh, good.
Last weekend, yeah.
So there's more than one way to catch a koala. You can use a team from the ground using extending poles. The window cleaning poles made of light carbon fibre are the best ones, in my opinion, because they're strong and light. Your maximum height really is 18 metres, so if the koala's above 18 metres, you're not going to be able to get above it to flag it down to your crew on the ground. Can anyone see the koala in either of those photos? It's a little bit hard to see. It's just below the hood on the right-hand side in that one. And it is in one of the forks where that flagging pole is heading towards in the other one. So if the koala is more than 18 metres up a tree, you need to get climbers into the surrounding trees and get them to get their flagging pole above it. People to climb trees have to be a particular personality type. Safety comes first. They're all trained and they all wear helmets. And the modern way to climb a tree is incredibly safe, and the equipment that's around to do it with is, even I would climb a tree using it. And then the third way to catch them, if you can't flag them down from the ground or flag them down from above climbing, you can trap them. So the standard koala trap is a core flute trap held in place with some steel pegs, and then a specially designed trap that the koala walks into. And the next slide has a video of a koala walking into a trap. So he's come down out of the tree and you can see the clear collars stop him from going back up the tree. He walks around the core flute perimeter being all confused. He finds the only opening is a trap. He's a bit suspicious. And eventually you put a little bit of leaf in there and there's a treadle mechanism. In the modern world there's a sensor on the trap that tells your mobile phone that the koala's been caught, and you can look on your video and you go, let's go get it. So they don't even have to sit in the trap all night. So that's what a health assessment looks like happening. So some friends of mine have made me a portable laboratory out of their horse float, so we've got air conditioning, and that's for the koalas, not for the people. Because when you catch them out of a tree, it can be an exciting process, and they can arrive to you a little bit heat stressed, so you want to keep them nice and cool while they're having an exam, because any anaesthetic is a life-threatening experience. So we do the things I mentioned before. The most important part of the assessment is the PCR swabs looking for chlamydia, because the prevalence of chlamydia has a major impact on the health of your population. So out here in Pittsworth you have approximately 30% of the koalas have evidence of chlamydiosis. We've seen 4 females that are permanently infertile as a consequence of chlamydia disease. That's just a little bit more. The extent of the examination includes an ultrasound, because the effects of the chlamydia, some of them can only be detected by ultrasound examination of the female reproductive tract, because they can be PCR negative but still have permanent infertility. And that's the end of the procedure, where the female is waking up with the nurturing hands of the vet nurse. The way I do a health assessment is with an experienced wildlife vet and an experienced wildlife vet nurse. And there's just some cute pictures of the babies we find in the pouches, so that is a Pittsworth koala. And then at the end of the exam, you let them go at the point of capture, and you see a couple of features of that slide is that some of them live in very suboptimal habitat. So that's an old, dry poplar box with very few trees anywhere else around it. This is a road verge. There is a population of koalas, but there are a number of koalas that barely move off just one strip of trees in one road, and they don't have many choices. So the horror of that is when they produce offspring, their offspring are supposed to disperse and find a place to live of their own, and there's very little left for them. There is a koala release that's left here. That's Kenny with his solar-powered, that's a Cavalier tag that's got a solar-powered battery. The collar also contains a VHF so that if one of the mechanisms fails, you've got two ways of finding the koala again. And you can monitor the movement of the koalas from an app that was developed for cattle. So you think you've got problems. Koalas have many, many more. So let's go into the problems that koalas face. The threats that face koalas, the primary ones are habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. It's pretty obvious that without habitat, nothing can survive. We've known about the significance of habitat to koala conservation for decades and decades, and yet we continue to destroy it, fragment it, with gay abandon. And it's distressing for a person who has committed themselves to koala conservation to see how the damage is actually escalating in my lifetime. And then the other threats are a consequence of the habitat loss. They get hit by cars. Approximately 30% of hospital admissions are hit by cars. Approximately 40% are affected by chlamydiosis. And chlamydiosis is a sexually transmitted disease that is far more likely to affect animals that are living on suboptimal nutrition when their habitat is compromised. Domestic dog attack accounts for 10% of hospital admissions. Australians have a propensity to have aggressive dogs, something about our personality type or what you can get from the local pound. They often kill koalas very effectively. So dog attack accounts for 10%. And then climate change is the overarching thing that becomes more and more of a concern. You remember the fires of Queensland and New South Wales in 2019 and 2020. That's koala habitat in New South Wales. Nothing can survive that. We don't even know how many koalas we lost during those fires because there's no trace left behind when they're a spot as those fires were. And then of course drought goes hand in hand with climate change. The Australian countryside has been experienced drought for years, and koalas are drought-adapted species. They're quite good at conserving water. But the situation becomes compounded when the habitat is compromised, fragmented, or lost. So the impacts of drought become something that they can't compensate for. I want to talk now a little bit about the impacts of humans on koalas in the urban environment. So during my years at Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, it was an opportunity to collect data and analyse data to see what was happening in that southeast Queensland Moreton Bay stronghold of koalas, or once a stronghold. So this is the number of admissions to Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital from 2004 to 2018. It's not meant to be a normal distribution, but it turns out to be one. And the really interesting thing is the number of cases admitted to the hospital increased annually until 2012. That was almost certainly as a consequence of urban sprawl, where people were taking more and more of the habitat, so more koalas were admitted to the hospital with car trauma, dog trauma, disease. From 2012, it looks like there was a tipping point from which there are now less and less koalas available to need rescuing from the Moreton Bay region. That's not a, yay, everything's great, less koalas need hospitals. That's a, oh my God, there are less koalas that need hospitalisation. And to compound that badness, an equal number of male and female koalas are admitted to the hospital, and you would expect that. The population of koalas is generally equal, males and females. But the number of males and females that are released after successful treatment, there are more males released than females. This is a very unhealthy strategy. It's not a deliberate thing. The females are affected more by chlamydiosis. They got the bad end of the plumbing, and they become infertile and so clinically ill that euthanasia is more often an outcome for female koalas than it is for males. Everybody knows that you can have one bull and 10 cows and you'll get 10 calves. This situation where there are less and less females going back out there, the population will continue to decline at an alarming rate. There is some happiness coming. A clever person made this mapping for me which shows from 2012 to 2020 the number of koalas admitted to the hospital from the Moreton Bay region by year, and you can see where they're coming from is the urban footprint of Brisbane and the Rays and Sunshine Coast. It's disheartening that almost every koala in Moreton Bay has at some point needed to go to the hospital because it has met with some kind of mishap as a consequence of human habitation. And this is what their world is like now, with expansion of housing needed for all the people coming to Queensland. But you see, the things they seek out look a little bit like trees because they're programmed to sit in something like that, but it actually causes me pain to see these koalas. And when you rescue them and you need to find a place to put them, you have limited options. All right, so things are grim in the suburbs. And it's probably not possible to protect the habitat the way you can out here. But what happens in the west? The koalas are restricted to single rows of trees on road verges. There are vast areas of open country to cross that are full of feral dogs, foxes and pigs. There's not enough shade. The environment is becoming incredibly hot. When trees are isolated in paddocks or on road verges and there's a thunderstorm, they're far more likely to be struck by lightning. And you can see in some of these road verges, the number of trees that have been damaged by lightning is quite alarming. And then controlled burning of road verges to protect crops can actually have a significant impact on the koalas if the controlled burn is not done controlled and it is not cool. So if koalas could make documentaries, I think they would want you to know a couple of things about what goes on out here in the west. This country used to be poplar box woodland. It has been gradually, since about 1840, turned into an agricultural landscape. That's the beautiful leaves of the poplar box that look a little bit like a ginkgo, in my opinion. That is the main species that koalas eat in this region, not the only species. And now they're gone. And it's been replaced with this. What's a koala to do with that environment? Did you know that Australia exports a lot of its sorghum to China? And you might be hoping that that's just being used as livestock feed, which wouldn't alarm me very much. But in fact, a lot of our Australian sorghum is used to make the largest selling alcoholic spirit on the planet, which is the national drink of China, baijiu. So almost 500,000 tonnes of our sorghum went to China in July of this year, which is an extraordinary amount. The fact that a lot of it will be used to make alcohol almost drives me to drink. So where did my habitat go? We don't need to. So in other alarming things, climate change is probably being felt more out here in the west, where so many of the trees have been cleared. So a whole opportunity for shade is diminished, and with the things that face koalas in the heat, where they can't actually get into a cooler environment, it's becoming a threatening process of its own. In November last year, it was 38 degrees in November. This little koala was so compromised, its mother had made a very bad choice about where to spend the middle of the day, and that little animal could not be saved. So 38 degrees is too hot for a koala. It's certainly too hot for a baby koala. So that is a picture of the casuarina forest that is just down the road from where that little koala was, and it's significantly cooler in the casuarina forest. But if there's not connectivity to get to the cool areas, then the animal is not going to move in the middle of the day and go, oh, I remember it was cooler down there. It's going to stay put because that's the strategy that used to work. So this is a burn that happened over in Kinkora that was a controlled burn, deliberately set fire in an area where there were 4 resident koalas. And you can see that that fire was not as controlled as it should be. The scorch marks and the heat effect go right up into the foliage of the trees, which were more than 20 metres tall. And so trees were actually killed in this fire. And the amount of food available to the koalas in that strip of vegetation was diminished by 30%. And there is no opportunity for recruitment of poplar box if they're being burnt on an annual basis. The isolated trees are very prone to lightning strike, as I mentioned before, and you can see, Longhurst Road, for example, the number of trees that have actually been killed or seriously cut back so that there'll be less vegetation available for the current resident koala. So what's the solution? Everybody has drawn the same conclusion. Everybody here is talking the same thing. You just have to keep planting trees. And the trees have to be connected. The point of that hexagon is that the trees must be planted on private land or they won't be protected in this region. We have category X vegetation, but it is not protected if it's on a road verge. If you own a farm and you care about the future of wild animals and the health of the planet in the long run, if you plant strips of trees wherever you can and your neighbours get together and you end up creating a corridor, that is the solution. And you're all doing it already, which is wonderful, but it is very clearly the only way forward. I used to say we need to vote for the environment. We need to tell our politicians that we care about the environment and that we understand its importance. But that is way too slow a way to get anything done. So everybody alive today needs to plant trees, as many and as quickly and as diverse. And it's not just planting them, you have to look after them after you've planted them. And you have to plant them according to what your soil type is, and there are other people speaking to that here today. So we're just finished with some beautiful pictures of the koalas that are still making it a living out here and reproducing successfully in this environment. See the little baby in there? So these koalas are living in little strips of poplar box along road verges, and we need them to have more on private property where it's safe.
Some of you have already noticed that Trish is here. So Trish is set up outside in the foyer. Trish is a wildlife carer, rescuer, rehabilitation, and she's brought along some animals for education purpose today. So just be aware there are some animals out there, so be quiet. Don't be too noisy when you're around them. But she will also give a bit of a demonstration later this morning. And Agaba is here. He's part of the dog detection unit at Southern Queensland Landscapes, and he will be doing a demonstration after our talks today as well.
Let's stand here when we find him sometime. So that's basically I can talk to you as he's doing his work. He can't stop until he finds it. So find it. Find for it. We keep to tell you what it is. Find it.
Wonder where they're going. Where does the puppy going to?
Oh yeah, he's checking every tree. So
Is he checking every tree?
I would do.
And hopefully you all saw, as you came through the foyer this morning, all the competition entries from students from Pittsworth School, St Stephen's School and Back Plains School. So I must admit, hey Boston, did you enter that competition?
He advocated for it.
He did convince lots of other people to enter that competition. So the students put a lot of work into them. They had to answer some questions about koalas, and then they did some amazing colouring. So they're all on display out there as well. So next we're going to hear from Ashley Woods. So Ashley is from Kelvinhaugh, cattle producer there, and is going to fill us in on his experience there planting trees. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Lana. Hi, everybody. My name's Ashley Woods, And as Lana correctly pronounced it, I'm from Kelvinhaugh, which is the name of our property. It's just to the north, sort of northeast of Oakey, up near the Army Aviation Base, if you know that part of Oakey. And as Rosie pointed out, Gomoran and Gumbunji are probably all Aboriginal words. Kelvinhaugh is not. It's a Scottish word. Our farm was settled by my great-grandmother in 1902, so it's been in the family for quite a long time. So back in about March or April, I engaged with Chris to do a thermal drone survey of our property to look for koalas. Now, when I was a kid, and I'm pretty old now, but when I was a kid, lots of koalas were native to the farm. We've got quite a large stand of poplar box on the western side of the house, and it was not unusual to hear koalas growling in that when I was a kid. And we have some chinchilla white gums planted in the garden around the house. We'd even find koalas in those trees in the garden. So it was not a novelty to see a koala when I was a kid, but in more recent times, it's been quite an exception to see a koala. So we engaged Chris to come out as part of his project and do a survey, and we found 2 koalas. So you can see we're in close proximity to the Army Aviation Base, so that introduced its own requirements for Chris and his survey. So we had to get clearance from the Army Base to fly because we are inside the airspace control zone for the Army Aviation Base. So there's a couple of really nice photos that Chris took from his drone showing the landscape and the trees. Most of these are mountain coolabah and yellow box in this area, and I've never seen a koala in those. So what we have on our farm are kind of stands of trees that the poplar box we find koalas in, but there's no corridor from there to the mountain coolabah or other trees around the farm that would be fine habitats for koalas, but we never find koalas in them. Our theory is that there's no connecting corridor, and Rosie talked about building corridors with her hexagon icons, and part of our planting strategy has been to build these corridors between the areas that we find koalas and the areas that we don't find koalas. So part of Chris's survey, as much as anything to identify where the koalas were, was also to find where the koalas were not. And there's no reason that we could see there shouldn't be koalas in that area of habitat. But in the survey, we found, this is an example of a thermal image taken from Chris's drone, that one that's down the back there. And this showed the hotspot in the tree. And we did this back in about April or May or something. So it was fairly cold, and it was really unsociable hours, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was fairly cool. So there was a good contrast between the hot spots that we would identify from the thermal image from the drone and the surrounding area, which was kind of quite cold. It was probably down about a couple of mornings, it would have been in single-digit figures, so there was quite a good contrast. But when we get close to this one, we see it's not actually a koala. There must be a bird or something living in that hole in the tree. So it showed up as a hotspot on the drone, but when you go back to look at it, because the drone will GPS tag where that location was, so you can go back after dawn and have a look at that tree. And this one was actually a dead tree, and we figured there must have been a bird nesting in there, which is why there was a hotspot signature. But we're fortunate enough to find a couple of other koalas. This one, I believe that's a large poplar box, and you can see the new fence that's been built along the road there. So it's quite a good contrast between the koala in the tree and the surrounding environment. So this is an image taken from also from the drone, taken up quite high. That was a really high tree. That's probably more than 30 metres high. So it was very difficult to spot that koala from the ground. Without the thermal drone, we would never have found that. You can see, just go back that one, Chris. And here's an optical image. You can see this stand of trees is a road corridor, basically, as Rosie has talked about. This tree happens to be on the inside of the fence, but a lot of our farm was cleared for cultivation many years ago, so the only remnants of this vegetation is along the road corridor, and some area that's been allowed to return to native vegetation over probably the last 50 years. So that tree is one of the original trees that was there, and there's the koala completely ignoring us. It was interesting to see during the survey that the koalas weren't at all perturbed by the noise or the presence of the drone. They would sometimes look up and look at you and then go back to sleep again. So it was refreshing or reassuring to see that they weren't disturbed or didn't cause any anxiety for the drone to be hovering around there. Admittedly, it was, almost from here to the back of the room away from most of the koalas.
I'm pretty sure it's a river red gum or Eucalyptus cameldulensis. I'm making that guess on the shape of the operculums or the fruit that are coming through. They are quite distinctively shaped in this region compared to the other eucalypts. It is most likely obviously a planted specimen, just because of its proximity to the fence. And yeah,
This line of trees was planted by my dad probably.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Probably as a landcare project.
Yeah.
In probably the mid-1980s.
Yeah, okay. Because you've got Pterodocornis, cameldulensis, crabra. I don't know what this one is.
Is this a chinchilla white gum?
It might be.
So, having seen some koalas, I'd already engaged in the planting program to rebuild some of the corridors, and as a result of Chris's survey, it's kind of steered my planting program a little bit slightly differently to the way I had envisaged it originally. And this is a typical area you can see cleared for cultivation, for quite a distance around, and I've now built tree enclosures like this. And I have 9 of these planted so far, and there's 6 trees at each enclosure at strategic areas around the farm, so that I can join up those corridors with the areas that the koalas weren't. So this particular one is one that I have planned. There's another 2 between there and the road, so to try and encourage the koalas to move from the road up to the hill, which we think is also quite good habitat for koalas. But when I originally planted these, I put steel posts and barbed wire fence around each tree, and that lasted about a week before the Herefords got in there and knocked over the steel posts and put their head between the wires and stretched them. So I went and took out all the steel posts I put in and put a perimeter around the trees and put an electric fence on there, and since then they've been undisturbed. But I had to replace a couple of trees that got chewed off by cattle early in the project. But now, since I've done that, this electric fence has kept them out, and what I have to do is water them. So I've got a watering pot at all of those locations, and I have another watering pot on the back of the ute, and every week or so I go and fill those up, and I have a hose with a timer on it that I can just move from one tree to the next, and I water them from anything from 30 minutes to half an hour, just gravity fed out of this pot.
Hi, I'm Ashley Woods from Kelvinhaugh, just north of Oakey in southern Queensland. This is a 600-acre property which was purchased by my great-grandparents in 1903. For several generations, the land was cleared to make way for cultivation and grazing. But back in the 1980s, Dad started to reverse this by planting eucalypt trees across parts of the farm. In other areas, he converted to pasture or ceased cultivating the paddocks, allowing the natural trees and the vegetation to return. Over time, the cropping was phased out, and the farm is now used solely to raise grass-fed Herefords with no cropping. About 4 years ago, I moved back to the property after having lived in Sydney for many years. I wanted to continue Dad's efforts to regenerate the land, specifically to increase the tree plantings and, amongst other things, to increase the dwindling koala population. My local landcare group, the Gomorran and Doctors Creek Catchment Group, put me in contact with Chris Meibusch from the Toowoomba Region Koala Habitat Project. The idea was to have Chris come to the property and conduct some thermal drone surveys of our scattered tree habitat to determine the spread of koalas across the property. I hoped that these surveys would help guide my future tree planting program across the property. Chris, this is the first of our plantings of eucalypts as part of the Bring Koalas Back project. These trees were planted about 3 weeks ago, and this is one of the 7 plantings that I've got planned for around the farm. And here we have a collection of Eucalyptus terraticornis and Eucalyptus albans, which were recommended by the ecologist for this particular part of the farm. When we planted these originally, we put star pickets or steel posts around them with barbed wire around each individual tree. That was unsuccessful because the cattle managed to get in and destroy at least one of the trees, which I had to replace. So we replaced the barbed wire fence with an electric fence. You can see the energizer in the far corner over there, and that's been very successful because the cattle have, as you can see, the trees are all still intact.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashley, and congratulations on the work that you are doing there on the property. The koalas obviously really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Shaen Egan, who's the president of Save Mount Lofty Inc.
My talk's a little bit different today. I've called it sustainable farming and living with nature. I just wanted to say the incredible work that you people are doing in this, in every part of it, and I really commend it. I have a concern though, and I'm just wondering if the landowners, particularly the younger generation of landowners, are concerned about losing the viability of their farms by being told to plant trees for koalas. And this is not a criticism, it's just an observation that I feel possibly needs to be addressed within the whole concept of land management, which is what I'm all about. And I'd like to ask you a few questions. Is who owns a farm? Who perhaps inherited their farm from parents or grandparents or fairy godmothers? Who bought their farm and now has a debt to consider on their farm's return? Who likes to think they should share their farm with native trees and animals, but are concerned about the loss of profit? Who already shares their farm with native trees and native animals? What constraints do you have with sharing your farmland with native trees and native animals? Who thinks that they should not? Don't care, reckon they can't afford it and it's not their problem, they just want the money. How many mature native trees do you have on your land? Do you actually know? Do you know their species? These are all parts of land management. I look at the whole thing, and I've managed properties most of my life until I retired. And that was all about managing the whole as a whole, whether you've got native animals on it, whether you've got farming, whether you've got domestic animals, whether you've got wild dogs, vermin, whatever it is, it has to be part of a picture. And I always say, I was brought up on sheep properties, and I always said that sheep farmers on sheep stations were probably the best agricultural farmers in the world. How many mature native trees do you have on your farm that have holes or hollows in them where native birds and native animals can call home? Have you ever looked at the intricate beauty of a big old gum tree? I mean, to me, they are the absolute epitome of beauty. To see them where I live in the afternoons on some days, as the sun sets, it just goes down onto the area that we look down onto, and these trees come up like they're just glowing. It's amazing. And you look at the intricacy of them. And when you look at that, and then you say, go and get the D7 mate, we'll push her over, then you have another thing, perhaps. Do you intend planting more native trees on your land? If so, why would you do that? If not, why not? How many native animals do you have on your farm? These might include birds of all kinds, goannas, we were talking about to the kids earlier, lizards, little critters like possums, gliders, and many other furry friends. Kangaroos, wallabies, and you just saw outside you've got echidnas, and there's just a whole myriad of them, and they're all magnificent. I'm talking about native animals. Rabbits, pigs, foxes, fire ants, cats, wild dogs are excluded. Are you aware that there are 23 million cats in Australia? And each cat's capable of killing 3 small animals or birds every night. That's 69 million small animals or birds each night. Scary, eh? And now, who's lucky enough to have koalas living on their land? This amazing animal that's unique in this country, and that these days so many people want to cuddle. We clear fell the land and wonder why there's no microbes in our soil and complain about the cost of nitrogen. We burn our mulch and then buy fertiliser in its place. We clear our fence lines and remove the windbreaks to protect our livestock and wildlife from heat, wind and cold. We bulldoze massive areas of mature trees that have been connecting lifelines to 100 species of wildlife for 1,000 years without a thought. I wonder how much of the present floods and weather is caused by bulldozing our forests without thought to our planet. This planet of ours is not just for human beings, you know. It was meant for everybody. And whether you're religious or a scientist or none of that, somebody surely made a pretty good job of creating it. While humans continue to do their best to destroy it. I believe that every Australian farmer, council and community member has a responsibility to care and make welcome their share of Australian native flora and wildlife. I believe that best practice sustainable land management is a forgotten art and needs to be seriously re-established and taught in this country. We humans, who claim to be superior to all other species on the planet, have this responsibility. I'm an old but passionate believer in good land management. If you're a landowner, be it for 1 hectare or 100,000 hectares, if you can't manage your land in a sustainable way, perhaps you should know. For over 200 years, Australians have farmed and managed their land. Admittedly, some much better than others. Some have been wise and matured their land. Some have been greedy and destroyed it. We can and must have sustainable farming. We can have sheep and cattle and horses and goats and crops that feed the world and still keep our fauna and flora safe and sustainable. But we must recognise and accept our responsibility as the guardians of what is special in our country. The present covering of rich farmland and magical bushland with black and white colour bond, eve-to-eve, single-level, overpriced houses, destroying all that lives within the area, is a pretty soul-destroying thing to do. I find the greed and lack of forethought of development quite astounding. Land management should be a paramount concern, not an afterthought. Pushing ancient trees over and clearing land with mighty machines is a macho thing. I know, I've done it. You know, we Aussies are bloody lucky. We live in a great land full of great people and absolutely unique fauna and flora. Have a think about the role you can play and what you can do to help. Thanks for listening.
I'm Chris Meibusch from the Toowoomba Region Koala Habitat Project, and that's run by a small urban landcare group called Save Mount Lofty, of which Shaen is the president. We're in suburbia, well, on the edge of suburbia in Toowoomba on the escarpment. We look at your district here with great envy, seeing the potential for the planting that you have there. We haven't got the acreage to be able to grow the really large trees, and we see the potential for protecting koalas coming in these areas and in other areas where I'm working under this project. For example, up at Queensland and Maclagan, up the northwest of our region, and also out at Cecil Plains where I'm doing thermal drones shortly. Let's talk about this thermal drone, and this is part of the project that we're running. This has been funded under a Commonwealth government project, and so we've purchased this DJI Mavic, which is a Chinese brand that runs all the effective drones throughout the world now. In addition to this, we had a whole training package to enable myself to become a chief pilot for this with CASA accreditation, to enable us to fly this aircraft out of standard operating procedures. And that means in the middle of the night. That means close to the Oakey Army Aviation Base. that means I could go over the ceiling height for the operations. In addition, we've got major insurances come with this aircraft because the standard insurance that Landcare operations have doesn't cover drone operations. So we've had to go out and purchase separate public liability insurance in relation to this drone. So basically, if you want to find out more about our thermal drone operations, go onto our Facebook page. But basically, we come out to properties like Ashley at Kelvinhaugh, and we survey in the middle of the night over habitat, and we look for distinctive hotspots. And if we see a distinctive hotspot that we suspect will be a koala, we drop a GPS pin there, and later in the day we can go back in after dawn and look for that particular koala. Since then, we have just recently purchased this spotlight so that we can fly over, and if in fact we see in the dark with the thermal image the koala hotspot there, then we can fly over that and turn on our spotlight on top here and take a normal resolution photograph of the animal highlighted by the light of the spotlight. And as part of our project, I'm writing up the methodology of the use of these drones, and hopefully we can get that out into the wider community rather than the commercial community or the academic community, and see other organisations like ours take on this technology, because it is transformative of finding koalas. The next part of our project is this little booklet, and it's entitled So You're Thinking of Planting Koala Trees. And this came out of our work with Rebecca Mulmerin running her tree planting program, and Tony Gorry from Gamara and Doctors Creek Landcare Group running her tree planting program. And we found out the demographic of the people they really wanted to get basic information about planting trees. So we arrived at this booklet, and we'll be distributing this through the Landcare groups out to prospective landholders that are wanting to plant. On the inside page, there's a QR code that links you to our website. Pages of really detailed information about planting trees on the website that you can access. The real quality in this booklet, prepared by our ecologist Shannon Michael, is in this page here that arrives, and I don't know if you can see, but it arrives at 7 zones within our region and identifies that into 7 distinct zones based on climate, aspect, that is its exposure to, from the topography to winds and frost and those sorts of things, and also the climate and soils in particular. 7 different areas, and then we have recommended 7 species, 7 particular species, the most popular, and identified from those species which zones they are appropriate to be planting in. So we think that methodology is quite accessible to people, but also quite unique. Our online resource has another 31 species of koala trees, and those species are recommended in terms of their particular zones. So that's a resource that you're welcome, and there are plenty of copies at the back there to take home. So we're really quite proud of this little production, printed this week by Cracker Printing in Toowoomba. And finally, this is our annual event that we run every November in the Toowoomba region. And the koala count originally came from, I think I saw a proposed koala count from the Logan City Council. Our first year, in 2021, we found 45 koalas. 45, we were quite pleased with the effort that we put in. In 22, we found 189 koalas across the region. And we were starting to get more excited. And then last year, we found 220 koalas from 30 different individual observers. We had about 110 people out in the field looking, but 30 observers recorded their observations on the iNaturalist app, which if you are tech savvy on your mobile phone, it's really, once you get the run of it, just take a photo, upload it to the website. It takes the metadata from the photo. So there's the time and the GPS coordinates of the photo, and then puts it on the map straight away. The photo goes up, and then scientists from all around the world look at that photo and the metadata, and then confirm that as being of a research grade to go on to the formal observation on our project. So last year we were 220. What do we want to do this year? beat 220. But anyway, we have 3 projects days coming up. Next Saturday, which is Saturday the 16th of November, we'll be at Crow's Nest, meeting there at 8 o'clock on the Saturday morning. Last year, we had 20 people turn up to the cafe, and within 2 hours, we found 38 koalas. And if you look at that density and compare that density to anywhere in Australia, that is really impressive. This year, a little bit concerned for a number of other reasons that I've tossed around with people more expert than me, is that we may not find as many koalas. The reasoning, what do you think might be the reasoning for that? One is that we've had such a good season that the koalas don't have to retreat back into moist gullies for their feed. The whole of the escarpment is available for them to graze on, so that we don't just go back to their favourite gullies and find them there. They could be anywhere. And already out there, we found, as of this morning, 37 observations are on the iNaturalist site. So that's really, we're really kicking on towards beating 220 this year. On the 23rd of November, we'll be at Geum, Kabala Highfields, that area there, meeting at the Geum School. And that will be run by Jan Cluett, whose wonderful koalas images you see in the booklet here. They're planting there that they have been planting for, say, 30 years, and they now have resident koalas that they know exactly. If they go to a particular tree, they can go up there and go, oh, that's propinqua, and they get the photo and compare the nose markings. And just wonderful. Now those koalas, they'll come through their property, but they're, you know, every sort of couple of months they'll tick them off, and those koalas are coming back through. Why? Because they've planted over the years a wide variety of species that are natural to that area, but that's enabled those koalas to drift through, and at that particular time of year find that those particular trees are ripe for them to eat, or not, as the case may be, and there's a variety for them. So anyway, Jan, we're doing that. That's fantastic. Also with Deb Hansen from Claws there, a wonderful spotter of koalas. And then finally this month, on the 30th of November, we'll be back at Yarranlee. And we hope to see a lot of you come out and join us out there. In the week before, I'll be doing some thermal drone surveys around Scrubby Mountain down to Tummerville, and hopefully we'll locate some koalas in those with those thermal drones. But on the 30th of November, we'll join back up here and have a great day. We'll probably start around 7, 8 in the morning, go through to 11 o'clock. So thank you very much for listening.
I guess I'll just finish up by thanking you all for coming along. I know it's been a long morning and you've sat here and listened to a lot, but we really appreciate it. I hope you've learnt something about the koalas in this region. If you have any questions, reach out to any of us. I'd really like to thank our speakers for today. So thank you, Rosie, thank you, Ashley, thank you, Shaen, thank you, Chris. Yeah, without you guys, we couldn't have days like this.